Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2021 Build to Scale webinar. My name is Lindsay Cox. I'm with the Office of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, and I'll be taking you through the presentation today. So today we will be covering a variety of topics related to Build to Scale. First, a general overview of who we are in the office and at EDA and with the Build to Scale program. Then some details related to 2021 Build to Scale, as well as some specific application information for those who are wishing to apply. And then we'll kind of close with a timeline of when things will be occurring. So to start us off, I love to start on this slide, which is our program mission. So at the Build to Scale, with the Build to Scale program, we're aiming to build regional economies through scalable startups. And I think this is great. It's something that you can come back to and always keep in mind, kind of be your guiding star as you're considering if you should apply to the Build to Scale program or what you should be applying to the Build to Scale program with. So the Build to Scale program is authorized through Section 27 of the Stevenson-Wilder Technology Act, which aims for a few things, or charges us with a few different things. So strengthening regional innovation initiatives, building innovation-based business ventures, scaling new products, processes, and services in the market, and then achieving measurable economic impacts such as new business starts, jobs, venture capital raised in the region, and more. So this is the legislation that empowers the Build to Scale program into being. It's, again, Section 27 of Stevenson-Wilder if you are a policy buff and want to get in and check it out. So who do we fund exactly with the Build to Scale program? So we've mentioned scalable, we've mentioned ventures, we've mentioned business starts, but who is eligible to receive this funding? So with the Build to Scale program, we are able to fund support organizations. So that could be entrepreneurship centers, accelerators, universities, nonprofits, government entities that are doing this type of work. But it is those support organizations themselves. Our funding cannot go, and you'll hear this several times throughout the presentation, our funding cannot go directly to entrepreneurs, scalable companies, or individuals. It is, again, meant for those support organizations who are supporting those individuals, but not those individuals themselves. And this is where we really see the Build to Scale program fitting in on what we like to call kind of the community hierarchy of needs, if you will. So you've got your basic infrastructure down at the bottom, kind of a necessary element for economic development, as well as your technology infrastructure, so things like broadband. And then you have your business support, and that could be more traditional business support. As well as innovation engine. So that's when you get into those entities that are really leading the charge of innovation within their community. It could be a university. It could be, again, an accelerator or individual entity outside of kind of that university ecosystem. And that's really where the Build to Scale program plays. So we're really supporting economic development that is occurring between that business support and innovation engine pyramid, if you will, which all builds together to create a really healthy ecosystem. I did want to show this as I think it's really valuable for folks to get a little bit more of an idea of the EDA ecosystem. So the Build to Scale program is run out of the Office of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, which is an office within EDA, within the Economic Development Administration. And EDA, again, is national. We have 6 regional offices, and the Build to Scale program is a national program that functions with regional collaboration. And typically, if you've engaged with EDA before, or if you're looking for other ways outside of Build to Scale to engage with EDA, it's through this regional ecosystem that you would do that. So again, you can kind of identify where you flow into that. But for the Build to Scale program, that is, again, a national program. It touches all of these regions and is run out of our HQ office here in Washington, D.C. But we could not do it without the support of our regional collaboration. So I wanted to take a few minutes to review some numbers. I like numbers, so I figure you guys like numbers and we can go through those together. So we'll touch on overall numbers for the Build to Scale program and some historical data, and then we'll talk about funding amounts for this year, which I think is what folks are really interested in. So for FY20, so again, this is last year. For FY20, we had 52 selected grantees. Those were made up of 29 venture, 16 capital, and 7 industry. So those represent our individual challenges, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes. Those 52 selected grantees came out of an initial pool of 609 submissions. So I do want to highlight that to just kind of show the competitive nature of the Build to Scale program, not to discourage anyone from applying. In fact, we really encourage you to apply as long as you're eligible. But we just want to say that right off the bat to kind of put that in perspective of how in demand and oversubscribed this program is, and to let you know that you should focus some time, attention, and energy on making sure that you're putting a great application forward. So with those FY20 grantees that we funded last year, we've now reached coverage in all 50 states and 2 territories. We've now made 277 grants through the Build to Scale program and its predecessor, and we've deployed $135 million of federal dollars, which has been matched with about $155 of community and local support. So some really impressive numbers for a program that's actually just been around since 2014. And to show that, in 2014, we actually started with just $10 million, and we've seen a steady increase directly related, we think, to the demand and the success of the program over the past several years, which brings us to today. So for 2021, there is $38 million of Build to Scale funding available. This is our largest pool of money we've had to date. Last year, we had $33 million. Plus an additional $2 million from Department of Energy, but $33 million that was authorized by Congress, or appropriated, I should say. And that represents kind of a steep increase, as you can see from our initial numbers in 2014, and even as recently as 2019, when we actually had $22.5 million available. So quite an increase of funding that is available for this great and super impactful program. So what does that mean for this year? So for this year, again, we have 38 million available. That will be broken up, as you see on your screen, with approximately 32 million being made available for venture, which is our most popular competition, and then 6 million being available for the capital challenge. And again, if these terms feel foreign to you, what's venture, what's capital? What do you mean competitions? We'll be talking about those in more detail as we go through the presentation. Just a note that there is not going to be an industry challenge for FY21. Last year, we did do an industry challenge, which was focused on the blue economy. We did that in partnership with the Department of Energy. This year, we are not going to have an industry challenge, but we are hoping to bring that back for FY2022. So just stay tuned on that front. So next up, we're going to get into some specific details of these 2 challenges. So first up, we have the Venture Challenge, which seeks to support entrepreneurship and accelerate company growth in communities, regions, or combination of regions. Again, this is our biggest kind of pool of money and where a lot of our applications come from. And the Venture Challenge is really tackling organizations that should be supporting companies that are scalable by nature, challenging the status quo of markets, commercializing technology, and furthering job creation. So again, Build to Scale is providing funding for those support organizations, and those organizations should be supporting these styles of companies. So you can kind of tell from the language here that this is lending a little bit above traditional small business, because it really is tackling those scalable companies that might be breaking into a new market or creating a new market, disrupting a market, actually creating and commercializing technology, and that are really furthering job creation through their companies and businesses. So just to keep that in mind. The Venture Challenge is a single competition. So it's just one competition, but there's two funding levels within it. And this was the same case for fiscal year 20. So with the Venture Challenge, we have both build and scale funding levels. The $32 million available will fund both of these funding levels. And first, we'll talk about build. So build is really focused on piloting a solution to a demonstrated need. What does that mean? It really means that you've identified this need in your community, region, sector, and that you're going to be piloting a solution to solve for that need. Or it could mean implementing a proven solution for a new community or region. So say that you've seen something done really successfully and you want to bring that to your community or region. Build could also help you do that. And those grants are for up to $750,000 over a 3-year period. Next up, we have scale. So the scale funding level is really about scaling existing initiatives with proven impacts. And I think kind of something key that differentiates build and scale is for scale, we're really looking for organizations that have a proven track record of successful program deployment. Now, that does not mean successful build to scale program deployment. You don't have to have already been a past grantee in order to engage with the scale funding level, but it does mean that you do need to have been doing this kind of work, supporting scalable companies, and have a proven track record that you've been doing that successfully. And with those scale level grants, those can be up to $1.5 million over a 3-year period. And then next up, we have the capital challenge. And with the capital challenge, we're seeking to increase increase access to risk capital in communities, sectors, or regions where that is in short supply. The Capital Challenge provides operational support for the formation, launch, or scale of investment funds that seek to invest their capital in scalable startups. Again, I want to highlight that those are investment funds. We actually cannot support loan programs with the Capital Challenge, so it does need to have that risk capital component to it. And then it can also provide operational support for organizations with a goal to expand capital deployment within their community, region, or regional industry. And the way to think about that is such a program such as an angel network or an investor training program would kind of fit within that purview. And again, what all of those have in common is they are seeking to increase access to capital for risk capital. So where risk capital is in short supply. And with the capital challenge, again, like all build to scale funding, it cannot go directly to startups. So this is to cover programmatic and operating expenses related to your initiatives around getting that risk capital deployed. And these grants are for up to $400,000 over the 3-year period. So I'm going to stop right here and go over some really important components for both of the Venture Challenge and the Scale Challenge. So funding cannot go directly to startups. I know we just said that, but I'm going to say it again because I think it is so important. These grants are for programmatic and operating expenses for the support organizations. The funding cannot go, it can't even flow directly to the startup. So make sure to keep that in mind. You can only submit one application per challenge, and I've got per challenge bolded there. So remember, for the Venture Challenge, there's 2 funding levels, but it's one challenge. So you can only submit one application to the Venture Challenge. You'll need to pick which funding level you're going to be submitting at. But now what you can do is you can apply to both the Venture and the Capital Challenge. But again, just one application per each. You have to be an eligible entity to apply. And we're going to review who those eligible entities are later on in this presentation, but they're also available in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. They're available on the website. It is really key that you're an eligible entity. If you're not an eligible entity, then you're not technically qualified for the program. So you can't receive funding. So please make sure you're an eligible entity. And then this is key. We're going to talk about it a little more when we get to the match section, but one-to-one match is required. It is required for all of these grants in the Build to Scale program. What that means is if you're going to submit for a $750,000 venture challenge grant, you also need to be bringing $750,000 of match to the table. Again, we're going to talk more specifically about match later on, but a one-to-one match is required for any grant with the Build to Scale program. And then I'll kind of leave our programmatic section with this final thought for you, which is that all of the Build to Scale grants, prior grantees, are really unique. They're not trying to be the Silicon Valley of, fill in the blank of region or item or industry, if you will. But they're really tackling specific needs that they've assessed for their community. So that means that they're just not one size fits all solutions. And I think that's really important for everyone to keep in mind as they're compiling their applications. So next up, we're going to talk about some technical requirements of the Build to Scale program. You don't want to get knocked out by a technical mistake. If you have a technical mistake in your application, it actually does not make it through to merit review. So we want you to read the Notice of Funding Opportunity thoroughly. And please, 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 I cannot overemphasize this enough. Don't wait until the last minute to submit. And one of the reasons we like to highlight not waiting until the last minute to submit is all of these application systems are necessary to apply to the Build to Scale program. So you have to have a DUNS number, you have to have an EIN, you need to be registered with SAM, you need to be registered with grants.gov because that's how you actually submit your application. And you're going to need to have that authorized representative who's able to submit your application and also receive receive funding if you're selected. So this is a lot of application systems, and all of these things require time. So if you're a brand new entity and you're not, you don't have your DUNS number or EIN, you're going to need to tackle it. That can take some time. If you're not up to date on your SAM registration, that also can take some time. And so, if you wait to start on these application systems until 2 days before the application is due, it's unlikely that you'll be able to complete them all. And in order to get to that grants.gov step where you actually submit and set up your workspace for your application. So please, if you're watching this webinar, don't wait until the last minute to apply. Start making sure that you have your ducks in a row now on these technical application systems. I talked about this a little bit before, so now we're going to go through, so who exactly is eligible to apply to the Build to Scale program? So states, Indian tribes, cities, or other political subdivisions of the state, or an entity whose application is supported by the state or political subdivision of the state. We'll talk a little bit about what that government support looks like, and that is a nonprofit organization, an institute of higher ed, a public-private partnership, a science or research park, a federal lab, a venture development organization, or an economic development organization, or a consortium of the above. And what a consortium of the above means is really just co-applicants. So you're able to submit co-applicants. So for example, if you're a nonprofit and you're working with an institute of higher ed, you may be applying as a consortium. So I wanted to talk briefly about the couple entity types that I have with little flags on your screen, which are the public-private partnership and the economic development organization. Both of those entity types are going to require some unique documentation that we talk about in the Notice of Funding Opportunity and in the FY21 FAQs. Which, for a public-private partnership, it's a documented agreement that you guys are working together. For the economic development organization, it is, charter and bylaws that show that your organization your primary focus is economic development. And so just something to keep in mind if you are going to be submitting as one of those entity types, that you are going to need those additional organizational documentations to prove your eligibility. So if you fit into those categories, please make sure that you're checking out the FY21 FAQs and the Notice of Funding Opportunity and get a good sense for what you need to submit for that. Next up, we have the technical checklist. So this is actually available in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. It's Appendix D, but I think it's really handy, so I want to make sure I'm pointing this out to you guys so you don't miss it in the NOFO. And what this is it just shows all the documents you're required to submit and who is required to submit them. So I mentioned the notion of co-applicants. I know some folks do apply as co-applicants. This details what you need per applicant versus per application. So for example, you only need one project narrative. So if you're going to apply with another organization, you're going to be co-applicants. You just need the one project narrative, but you need all of your organizational documentation. So you need organizational documentation from both entities. And this checklist just does a nice job of running through in what I think is a pretty clear manner who needs to be submitting what forms. And again, this is in the back of the Notice of Funding Opportunity Appendix D. So next up, let's chat about the application itself. The link to access the application will take you to a grants.gov portal. That link to access can be found within the Notice of Funding Opportunity or from our website. But again, you should hopefully be reading the Notice of Funding Opportunity and you'll acquire it there. And this is a snapshot or a screenshot, I should say, of what this is actually going to look like when you log into grants.gov. So this is a screenshot from fiscal year 20, so it'll look a little bit different, but I did want to go ahead and put this on the screen so you could see it. So as you can see, there's capital challenge, venture challenge, and then you'll take the action of actually applying. And so this is the government system that you will go through to submit your actual application package. So when you click into one of the respective challenges, it's going to look like this. And you'll see all those mandatory forms over there on the left side. And again, those are all those forms that you need to be submitting with your application, as well as the space for your project narrative and your budget narrative. And we'll go through those items in a minute. But this is how you will actually do the applying, if you will. And so now let's talk about what is required in that full application. So we kind of showed you the system that you'll be using to submit it, but what is actually going to make up the meat of your application besides all the standard government forms? Again, all of this is found in the FY 2021 Notice of Funding Opportunity. It's all of these things that you see on your screen: the project narrative, the budget narrative, the matching letters. Remember, we talked about that one-to-one match being required, government support, and then all of these standard forms where applicable. So first, we're going to talk about the project narrative, and the project narrative is limited to 10 pages. There's also some requirements around spacing and font size and font type. So please make sure you're getting that from the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Don't technically disqualify yourself from not following that. So within the project narrative, we're asking you to address some specific elements, and you're seeing those on your screen now. So project description and overview, ecosystem resources and assets, your proposed solution, partnerships, measurable goals and feasibility, and sustainability. In the Notice of Funding Opportunity, you will see details around each of these elements, some nice prompts for you, what we're hoping that you'll tackle in that project narrative. So again, these are kind of the broad elements that we're going to be looking for, but the detail of what we're hoping to see is in the NOFO, so please check it out. And for that project narrative, we get a lot of questions about this. What makes a competitive project narrative? In general, a competitive project narrative is clear and concise. It has a well-defined strategic gap that it is seeking to fill, well-defined, well-demonstrated gap that it is seeking to address. It includes well-defined partnerships, and I really like to highlight this, the roles of those partnerships. So rather than just a list of partners, it's talking about how all those partners are going to be working together on these initiatives. It contains key milestones and dates, so really holding the application and the work accountable via those milestones and dates. It has identified an achievable scope of work. So of course we want you to stretch and have stretch goals as part of your application initiative, but we also want what you're setting out to do to be achievable and something that you think your community, your region, your entity, your partners can all really help empower to get done. And then last but not least, it should really demonstrate the long-term potential impact of what this project will do. So what are going to be the long-term effects if you're successful? So next up, we'll talk about the budget narrative and staffing plan. We have a recommended limit of 4 pages on this, but that's not a firm limit. You can go over that, but again, a recommended limit. And with that budget narrative and staffing plan, we've actually made a template available for you to use. And that's Appendix B of the Notice of Funding Opportunity. You're not required to use this template. However, I think the template is really handy. It's very straightforward, and it'll kind of make sure you're adhering to those federal budget categories. Because they match the SF424, as you'll see on the screen. That is a thing you need to do, and the template has that all nice and matched for you. So with the budget narrative and staffing plan, you're really going to be identifying and justifying how funds in each line item of the budget are going to be used to support the project. The staffing plan will list all positions that are going to be charged to the award. And then each line item, so each of your budget categories, should distinguish between what is federal and what is match. And so the whole budget you'll be presenting, or the budget you'll be presenting, will encompass your whole cost. So that is both the federal amount that you're requesting as well as those matching dollars. So for example, if you are requesting $750,000 of federal funds, then you'll be presenting a budget that is for at least $1.5 million, because you're required to have that one-to-one match, and you'll be distinguishing between what is federal and what is match. And then this is an important highlight. There should be an itemized valuation for in-kind funds, since match can be cash or in-kind. If you are using in-kind, so say that you've gotten some legal fees donated and that is in-kind, your budget should include an itemization of those in-kind funds. So how did you arrive at that number? So this is a great time to go from budget into match commitment letter. So to reiterate, match is required 1-to-1, and it can be cash, or in-kind, or a combination of both. We often get asked here at the office if we have a preference between cash or in-kind. We do not have a preference. We also often get asked if overmatching makes your application more competitive, and it does not make your application more competitive. So just something to keep in mind. So with those match commitment letters, this is very important. Your match must be committed, available, and unencumbered, and you should have signed commitment letters. Those are required. Those are a technical requirement of the grant. You have to have match commitment letters that attest that that match is committed, available, and unencumbered. So those will come from the organizations that are offering your match, or could even come from yourself, right? So if you're an organization who'll be matching part of this work with salaries from your employees, then you should be submitting a match letter on behalf of yourself that details that out, and that's signed by your authorized signer, or like your board chair, something to that effect. This is also really important. The match should be traceable to the budget narrative. So remember how I just said, in the budget, you're presenting this holistic budget for your application, and you're going to differentiate between your federal requested amount and your match requested amount. These match letters should directly tie back to that budget. And again, for the folks in the back, I've said this a lot, but I'm going to say it again. 1-to-1 or dollar for dollar match is required for the Build to Scale program. So for either grant that you're going to be going for, or for either challenge you're going to be going for, venture or capital, that 1-to-1 match is required. And then finally, I'll end on this component of the application, which is the government support letter. I referenced this in relation to entities that are going to be applying that are not the state or political subdivisions of the state. You are required to have a government support letter, and that needs to be related to your project service area. So for example, if your project is going to be serving counties A, B, and C, then you would want a government support letter from those counties. You would not want a government support letter from County X because they're not in your service area. I think this is also a good time to point out, although this again is in the NOFO and it's in the FAQs, that if you would like to submit support letters from your federal representatives, so from your federal senators or congresspersons, that's fine. They're more than welcome to submit a support letter. However, that cannot count as your government support letter. Your government support letter needs to be more localized. So that needs to it could come from like your state representative for your service area, but again, cannot come from the federal person. So just something to keep in mind. So we've talked about what is going to go into your application. So now let's talk about how those applications are going to be reviewed. And that's through 6 equally weighted categories. These categories are detailed in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. So I'm going to go through them here, but then you can go back and reference them in the NOFO. So starting out, reviewers are going to score on 6 criteria. Here are the first 3: ecosystem resources and assets, proposed solution, and use of partner entities. So you may be noticing a little bit of a trend here, which is that these review criteria are really directly related to what we're asking you to put forward in your application. The next criteria are measurable goals and sustainability, your budget and staffing plan, and then overall alignment with the Build to Scale program, with our goals and with our mission. Again, there's a lot of detail provided as far as the sliding scale that these will be measured on, and what the reviewers are going to be considering as they score on these criteria. And your application will get reviewed by at least 3 different reviewers, and that's what will make up scoring. So again, please check these out in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. I think that will be really insightful for you to keep in mind as you are preparing your applications. So what's next for Build to Scale? The application window is open. If you're seeing this webinar, it's because the application window is open. We anticipate that will be from February to April, and you'll have around 60 days from the date the Notice of Funding Opportunity goes live to complete that. And then from May to July, we'll be doing reviews and what we call award package creation. And then we're anticipating announcing FY21 grantees in August. So we got a timeline of about February to August up here on the screen, and that's just something to keep in mind as you're submitting just our internal processes and when we're hoping to make those announcements. And with that, I'm going to conclude today's webinar. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you have follow-up questions, you can email oie@eda.gov. However, I do want to say one thing here at the end, which is we cannot provide any kind of strategic advice from our office once the Notice of Funding Opportunity is live, which is of course now. So what that means is we can really only answer technical questions for you. So if you have a question about a form or your government support letter or phrasing on a match letter, you're welcome to email us with that. But if you're seeking strategic advice, we unfortunately cannot give that out because it is a live competition. So Please keep that in mind, and please keep in mind the kind of litany of resources that are available to you, which is that notice of funding opportunity. It has all of the info you're kind of looking for in there, as well as the FY21 FAQs, which have some supplementary information and just some more detail for questions you might have. So thank you again for tuning in today, and we look forward to receiving your application. Have a good one.